I am the executive director of an organization called Evidence Action. Evidence Action is a new organization specifically dedicated to massive scale-up of evidence-based interventions. We have identified and feel strongly that there's actually a real gap in the development space between pilots and the generation of evidence, increasingly so, in fact, over the last 10 or 15 years, and institutionalized large-scale programs like Gavi or something like that. In this gap, our vision is that Evidence Action will really be a leader and will be truly committed to impact and scale across multiple sectors. The programs that we are beginning with are Dispensers for Safe Water, what we're going to talk about here today, and school-based deworming, which I think you have previously recommended as an investment to your members. When you recommended school-based deworming, that had a different institutional home. It Deworm the World and Innovations for Poverty Action. As I'm sure your research has indicated, Dispensers for Safe Water has also, up until now, been housed institutionally at Innovations for Poverty Action. But as these two programs have grown, our deworming work has reached some 37 million children last year, and chlorine dispensers have reached 1 million people. It's increasingly clear that the right institutional place for these things is not at an organization that's dedicated to generating research, but they really need to be in an organization that is fit to purpose for taking things to very large scale. So hence the creation of Evidence Action and the transition of these programs from our sister IPA over to this new home. Getting us under the roof of Evidence Action is going to poise Dispensers for Safe Water to go from 1 million people today to a vision of 25 million people by 2018. On the deworming side, we're hoping to be reaching 100 million children by that year. So that's the big picture of who I am institutionally. Personally, who I am, I have been associated with chlorine dispensers in one way or another, actually, since about 2005 or 2006. And when I still thought I was going to be a professor when I grew up, was part of the team that did some of the early research on dispensers. I since then realized that I was in fact needing to go into recovery, and I'm a recovering academic, and I've spent my career since then actually more on the donor side of the fence. So prior to taking on this post, I was senior program officer at the Gates Foundation on the water and sanitation team, working primarily on evaluation and strategy for that group. So I've got a little bit of a mixture of a background. But in terms of the kind of questions that I can answer for you about dispensers, I think I'll be best able to speak at the strategic level, the business plan level, some of our metric stuff. The more you want to ask me about tactics of operations and implementation, I may need to flag those things to come back to you with. That button, yes, right now doesn't go to ring-fenced accounts. That is explicitly and solely for the Dispensers for Safe Water program. We are actually in the process of setting up a donation page on the Evidence Action website that our intention is to be live on or about November 1st. And at that point in time, we're actually going to turn that button off at IPA and have that page be changed, redirect people to Evidence Action. But the rules of the game there will be the same. It will be possible to give money to Evidence Action, but direct it specifically to the Dispensers for Safe Water program. And the answer is because monitoring is central to our business model. Actually, that sort of M&E challenge of how much M&E should we do, which an NGO might often face, is not a big problem for us. We have to do a lot of monitoring because that's how we get certified that we're really generating the carbon emissions reductions that we say that we are. So one thing that I like about this program is how the monitoring is very actionable. We do our monitoring because we make decisions on that basis and we make money on that basis. So a lot of the checking on program quality just occurs as part of our basic business. We particularly have not looked at health outcomes. There's two reasons for that. The first is that the Gates Foundation has given about $15 million to IPA and ICDDRB to do a very large randomized controlled trial of different water, sanitation, and hygiene interventions and their effects on child illness. So that's being done. One of the field sites is in Kenya, there's one in Bangladesh, there's a closely related project in Zimbabwe, and the intervention being studied in Kenya is chlorine dispensers. So that's being done in a very large, very serious RCT. So we have not collected health data in part because that study is going on. However, I would like to actually emphasize that that's not the only reason we haven't collected health data. The other reason we haven't collected health data is we are a program now operating at scale. We don't have a control group. We have no counterfactual. I wouldn't know how to interpret health data that I saw that comes with our program because there's lots of other things happening. I would not be able to ascribe any health outcomes that I saw to our program. And the third reason I'd emphasize is that there's actually quite a lot of very good existing epidemiological data on the impacts of drinking chlorinated water on diarrhea. So reductions on the order of 29% in that meta review by Colford and Arnold is the one I think I like personally the best. And so I'm very comfortable with we measure adoption, and we've got a very good handle on adoption rates. And that really drives our business. Are we keeping people using chlorine? And then we can extrapolate based on existing meta-analyses to think about how cost-effective is this program in terms of dollar per galley. So there's two things that you might think about. One thing might be that chlorine, when it's in your drinking water, there's also a chlorine residual, right, that provides residual protection. So that's one of the nice things about chlorine as opposed to a water filter. And so there's a little bit of chlorine left over in the water after the initial treatment so that, let's say, my fingers touch the water, there's still some chlorine left in there to potentially treat any fecal matter that could have come off of my fingers. However, that residual protection declines over time. So while water is stored in the home, the residual protection is declining over time. It's potentially possible that if people treated their water at the dispenser, they brought it home, but people touched the water, it was held long enough, by the time somebody drinks it, it's contaminated again. So that's certainly within the range of possibilities. Now, there's been some effort to look at the data in Kenya in particular about how long do people really keep water in their home, how long does it take for this chlorine to degrade, to try and get at, is this potential weak point, issue number 1, or is it issue number 10 in the grand scheme of things here? And so some of that research, if you wanted to have a look at that, is mostly published by Danielle Lantane, Lantagne, if you wanted to have a look at that. I read those papers to say that it's not perfect, nothing is, but by and large, people are not really holding their water for more than 24 hours before they're putting additional water from the jerry can where it's freshly treated into the ceramic stuff. And so while sometimes we might get our chlorine numbers to dip down below the level that would be recommended by the US EPA, it's not being held so long that we're getting really into seriously contaminated water again. But it is certainly true. You'll see often that chlorine levels would go down below the residual chlorine go down below what you might find as a best practice by the EPA. Where part of where the water sector is going right now is to this idea of everyone forever, that water services are a public service that our people have, that it's the government's affirmative obligation to provide those services to people, for everyone, forever. One of the ways I think about chlorine dispensers and our efforts to really blanket areas is to be part of everyone forever. And the service is provided as part of the sort of global commitment to safe drinking water, period. And with the variety of benefits incurred by that.